Are you ready to boost your confidence when selling so you're able to close more deals? Nikki Roush will show you how to build a foundation of skills and a mindset that creates sales success without feeling pushy or salesy and without fear of rejection. She is a sales strategist and coach with more than 25 years of sales experience and is master certified in neuro-linguistic programming. This is a radically different approach to selling. It's a no sleaze, no slime, and no stress approach to building your business. This is Sales Maven. Here's Nikki.
Welcome, and thank you for listening to the Sales Maven Show. I'm your host, Nikki Roush. I'm your own personal sales maven, here to offer you tips, techniques, and strategies to master your sales conversations. Today's episode is called You're Right, and Now You've Lost a Client. I am so excited to share this episode with you, share some of the stories and some technique for you, and hopefully have you think about your conversations with people, maybe in a new way, and have some new language to go with it. Now, before we jump into the actual content, I do want to give a shout out to somebody who left me a really sweet review, and I'm so flattered by this. So it says, highlight of 2021. This is a 5-star review. It then goes on to say, it was an incredible honor to be a guest on the Sales Maven podcast. That gives you a little hint about who left this review. So it was an honor to be a guest on the Sales Maven podcast. I had dreamed of having this opportunity. And soon after I joined the Sales Maven Society, I had a chance to apply for an on-air coaching call. I am still so blown away by all the golden nuggets Nikki shared with me to help me better prepare for an upcoming speaking event. I highly recommend the Sales Maven podcast and joining the society. This review was left by Mary Beth Simon. I'm so grateful for that. Thank you so much. I'm so flattered that you wanted to be a guest and that you said yes to do an on-air coaching call. So thank you so much. And if you didn't hear Mary Beth's episode, it's called Public Speaking and How to Monetize It. I do recommend it. I think there was a lot of information that was shared there. It got some really good feedback from people who listen to it, who do speaking and are excited about opportunities. So I'm excited. I'm excited for her. I'm excited for Mary Beth as she implements these things into her business. All right. So let's talk about being right. Do you like to be right? I may have said this on the podcast. I know people in the Sales Maven Society have heard me say this multiple times. I love to be right. Like, I really love to be right. It can be sometimes an issue in my marriage that I really love to be right. I like to win. I like to celebrate wins. I like to celebrate being right. Now, thankfully, I spent many, many years studying neuro-linguistic programming, studying relationships, and getting really clear on what is the priority for me, which is the relationship. So sometimes being right isn't the best thing to do. So thinking about this in your own business, and how does this show up in your business? This being right, this need to be right, and not just be right, but make sure the other person knows that you're right. How does that show up for you? How does it work for you? Does it attract people to you? Does it repel people away? Does it make people want to I can't wait to continue to work with you, or I can't wait until our working relationship comes to a close because you're not somebody I want to spend time with. A couple of stories. I wrote an article similar to this topic. I think it's called Be Right When It's Oh So Wrong. I wrote this years ago. And in there, I shared a story where I made a phone call to place an order online for something. And the person that was helping me, we were struggling in the conversation. So when she read my order back to me, she had said that I ordered 2 of something. And I was like, oh no, I just want 1 of it. And her response was, you made it sound like you wanted 2. To which I said, okay, I actually just want 1. So if you could just place an order for 1, that would be helpful. But there's this part of me that steps outside of myself. If you heard the episode where I talked about multiple perspectives. So I go into the observer role. And in the observer role, I think, how is this helping the relationship between these two people for somebody to go like, well, you made it sound this certain way. And even if this person is right, because I make a lot of mistakes, I say things wrong, and maybe I did unknowingly say something that sounded like I wanted two, but I actually only want one. And I'm the one who's going to pay, and I'm the one who's going to decide at the end whether or not I'm going to continue to place my order with this person, or if I'm going to like hang up and go find somebody else to place my order. And I just kind of think like, how is this serving you as the person who's pointing out to me that I said something wrong? Like, is this helping the relationship? Like, can you go home at the end of your shift or at the end of your day and like pat yourself on the back and go like, I was right today and somebody was wrong and I let them know it. But how does that help? It doesn't. And I don't think I ever ordered from this place again, just because of the way this person chose to have a response. Like it made me feel a little bit like she was trying to shame me. People don't like to be shamed, right? Even though we think this is a really effective way to get people to do things is by shaming them. If you follow Brene Brown, which I do, I love both of her podcasts, Unlocking Us and Dare to Lead. Oh, I love her work so much. Like she even talks about, like, I think I heard her talk about on an episode, if shaming worked, she'd be the first person in line to do it, which I think is funny because she studied shame and vulnerability. And she's like, if it really worked, I'd be the first person in line, like doing it for some of the things that had been, have been going on in our world and specifically here in the United States over the last few months. And even she's like, it doesn't work. Here's somebody who's a researcher. She's done all the research. Shaming people doesn't actually work. So why do it in a client-customer relationship? It just doesn't serve you. Now, here's another story. This one actually just happened to me very recently. My husband and I had to travel for something, and we drove to a place where we had to be and got a hotel room. And the hotel had, typical hotel key card, the little plastic card with kind of the newer, it's not that new, but kind of the newer place where you just put your key up to whatever the thing is and it unlocks the door or it opens the gate so you can get into park. So the key worked the first day that we were there. We were actually there we had 2 nights at this hotel. And the second day when we were going back and going to check back, like go back to our room and try to get the car back into the parking garage, my husband pulls his key he puts it in his wallet. So he pulls the key out of his wallet and he puts it up to the sensor. It doesn't work. He tries, a couple different things, flipping it this way, that way, turning it. It doesn't work. So I said, let me get my key. So I dig my key out that's still in the little sleeve that the front desk gave us. And I pull it out of the little paper sleeve, and it was in a special pocket in my purse. So it's not close to anything. So it's not going to deactivate. And I'm like, here's my key. And he takes my key and it doesn't work either. To which I turn to him and say, this is very common in hotels. When you stay multiple nights, most people only program your key for one night because that I think is more the norm. Now I know this because I have stayed in many, many hotels. I used to stay on average 75 nights a year in hotels. So I have a lot of experience with keys and hotel staff and the way that it works as a client, as a customer. So I said, they probably just programmed our keys for one night. So now we have to drive around the block. He pulls up in front of the hotel, to which the doors are locked. So you have to use your key to get in. But obviously our keys don't work, so we can't get in. So I push the little buzzer, and it's this really long doorbell type noise. It goes on for at least a minute. It's got a camera attached to it. There's no response, and there's nobody at the front desk. So I wait Then the little buzzer doorbell thing stops. So I push it again and I wait, go through the cycle. No answer. I turn back and look at my husband. He's still sitting in the car, and I give him the like shoulder shrug, like, I don't know what to do here because there's nobody at the front desk. Nobody's answering and the keys don't work. We can't really get in. So he gives me the like, holds his phone up, like, I'm going to call. So I push the thing again and I wait and I turn around and I see, he's trying to like find the number and call, and by this time I've gone through at least 5 cycles of pushing the button to try to get back into the hotel with no response. And I can see that my husband is now on the phone with somebody. He's talking to somebody. To which he shared with me later that the person who answered the phone said, when he said, hey, we're out front, my wife's trying to get in, our keys aren't working, we can't get into the parking garage. To which the person responded, oh, you probably didn't do it right. I'll come down and help your wife. Okay. So part of me, like, I don't know this because I can't hear this, but this is a discussion that we have later. To which the person comes through the front door, doesn't open the front door for me to come in, actually pushes, like kind of steps in my way. So I have to step back and he says, give me your keys. I'm going to show you how to do this. So now I'm a little bit like, okay. Go ahead and prove to me that I'm wrong, that I've been standing out here now for at least 10 minutes to try to get into the hotel just so I can park my car and get back to my room. But okay, so I give him my keys and he sits there and he does the same thing my husband does. He flips it one way, he flips it the other, then he takes my other key and he flips it this way and he flips it the other. And I'm still just standing there just waiting for this person to acknowledge that our keys don't work. Let me in. Get me a new key, like something here. And then he goes, okay, well, obviously these keys aren't working. Yeah, I already knew that, but thank you for telling me that my key isn't working after you already told me to give you my keys because I was doing it wrong. So then as we're walking to the front desk and I'm following behind him, he goes, cell phones are really hard on these keys. And now like my irritation level has like skyrocketed because now he has pointed out, to my knowledge, at least twice, but now really 3 times, that he's right and I'm wrong in some way. To which I then respond, why don't you take a look and see if you actually programmed the keys for 2 nights or just 1? Because I'm irritated and I just want the key to work. To which, he goes and checks and, guess what? He only programmed the key for 1 night. But does he acknowledge it? Does he apologize? Does he say, I'm so sorry for trying to be right and trying to prove to you that you're wrong? No, he just gives me the key and goes, this'll work now. Now, here's the thing. How does that serve him? Does he get to go home at the end of the night and go like, I was almost right? No, he doesn't, because he wasn't right, but he was so sure that he was right. He was so adamant that he was right that all he really did was break rapport with me. And I'm sure he works, I don't know. I don't think he's the owner. He might have been the owner. I doubt, based on his age, that he's the owner of this hotel. But here's what he did. He guaranteed that I will never stay there again. I just won't, because I refuse to give to my business to people who like to point out how they're right and I'm wrong. In a customer relationship, it just does not serve anybody. It's not helpful. It feels shaming. It feels annoying. I also don't like when people are wrong and then can't acknowledge it. Like, you're so adamant that you're right, but then you can't accept when you're wrong. Like, again, I said at the beginning, I love to be right. I really, really do. But I'm also okay with being wrong. And I acknowledge when I'm wrong and I apologize. And if he had apologized, we would have been fine. I wouldn't be telling this story on the podcast. But here's really the crux of this. If we had gone and done all the things that we did, couldn't get into the hotel because obviously he wasn't at the front desk. And I don't know, there's probably a reason he wasn't at the front desk. But the fact of the matter is, if we had waited all that time and my husband had called and he had just come down and gracefully opened the door and said, come on in, let me get your keys fixed for you, I wouldn't have even thought twice about this. It wouldn't have set me off. It wouldn't have made me want to have a conversation on the podcast about being right. It wouldn't have even been a topic that I probably would have brought up until I had another story to tell. But now I have a story and now I'm going to tell it. Obviously, I'm not going to call out the hotel because frankly, this could be probably 25% of the working staff that people don't train them. Like, your desire to be right is actually costing us business, whether you are right or not. Now think about this in your own business. Where are those places where you are so adamant that you're right and that you want to point it out to the other person? Now, there might be a part of you that's like, well, 9 out of 10 times I am right. Okay. What about that 1 out of 10 when you're wrong? Do you lose that client? And what about the times when you are right? How many of the other 9 feel shamed by you in some way? And then when they have repeat business to give, they don't give it to you. They give it to somebody else. Somebody else who hasn't shamed them. Somebody else who hasn't been like, I'm right, you're wrong. Now, I'll tell you, one of the places where I see this come up a lot in service-based business is when there's a creative component to the service that you provide. I've seen this in web designers. I've seen this in graphic designers. I've seen this in interior designers. I have seen this over and over again with clients where they want to share stories about feeling indignant because somebody doesn't like their idea and they're the expert and they want the person to take their idea, even though the customer who's paying is like, I don't really like this. I want this changed or I want that changed. And they get offended, right? Like, you're criticizing my work and I'm an expert at this and therefore you're wrong and I'm right. But how does that serve you and the client? Now, to all you creatives out there, I get it that is a representation of your work and you might choose that you don't want that to be the representation of your work and you can decline that business if that's the case for you. But doing it in a way that makes the other person feel wrong so that you can feel right is this idea of what we're talking about today. And then it's just not good business, frankly, for you. There's a quote that I was originally told this was a Buddha quote, but I think if you look it up, they say it's a fake Buddha quote, but it's the root of all suffering is attachment. I don't think that's exactly how Buddha said it. But this idea of the root of all suffering is attachment. Like, why suffer by being overly attached to something? This can be a really hard lesson for us in our own businesses. Like, I have lots of ideas and I am an expert when it comes to sales and I know what works when it comes to sales conversations, but there are so many times when clients will push back and go, you know what? I prefer it this way. Somebody will ask me for feedback on their, Nikki, would you give me some feedback on this email that I'm about to send out? And it's riddled with I statements. And there's a lot of I know what you're thinking type statements and the things that I don't recommend. And I will give my feedback. But if the client chooses to send the email the way they wrote it, or they're so adamant that this is what I want it to say, my answer is do it. Go for it. Because I am not attached to you taking my advice, frankly. I know my advice is sound. I know it works. And anytime I start feeling adamant, start feeling this desire and frustration when people don't take my advice, all it does is make me feel bad. And the last thing I want to do is make them feel bad in return. I did an offer recently where we we got some of the people who bought the offer complained, like, I didn't get the information that you said you were going to send. Somebody said like the page didn't work. It didn't take my credit card information properly, or I paid for this and I never got it. There was a couple of these things. So my response to every single one of those is, I'm so sorry. Let me check into this and find out what's going on, and we'll get it fixed right away. To which I then bring in my amazing online business manager, who's kind of my like fix it. She fixes everything. Now, every single one of the complaints that came back, she came back and said, this person actually put in an expired credit card, or this person put in they spelled their name wrong, which is why the email went to the wrong, email address, or there was always a reason for the reason, like none of it actually was something that was in our control. So that wasn't anything that we did wrong. But I didn't go back to each one of those people and be like, hey, I see you made a mistake. So because you made a mistake, this is your problem, not mine. No, I went back and said, hey, I just wanted to check in with you. It looks like we got this fixed in our system. Or, hey, my online business manager is going to reach out to you and we'll get this fixed for you. There was no like, I'm right and you're wrong. Because that doesn't serve me. That doesn't serve my business. That doesn't come across like rapport as the primary, foundation of everything that I teach. So think about when you have these situations, is it in your best interest to dig your heels in and do this I'm right, you're wrong attitude? How does that serve your business? And some of these things are subtle. I'm actually going to give you an example of one that's a little bit more subtle. And this comes from, I don't know if you've ever heard, people will say paraphrase. And I think I've talked about this in the podcast before about, paraphrase what people say to you. And this is a way to show that you're listening. Now, from my NLP training, we know that paraphrasing actually is not in your best interest because it changes the context of what the person says and it doesn't land and it doesn't have the same type of impact as if you use a technique that's known as backtracking. So this is something that's taught in neurolinguistic programming. And there's a way that you backtrack where you state back what somebody has said, but you always check to make sure that you said it correctly. Now, when I teach paraphrasing, or I don't teach paraphrasing, when I teach backtracking, there's often somebody in the room will say, when I say, okay, now state back to them what they said, they'll say, what I heard you say was, now you might go like, oh, what's wrong with that? Well, what's wrong with it is it's hard to negate what somebody heard you say. And so if you use that phrase in front of your backtracking and the person wants to then correct it, what they're correcting can come across of them saying, you're wrong, I'm right, which can sometimes be hard for people to do. And you don't want to put your client or your prospect in a position to have to correct you. Now, it doesn't mean people won't correct you. Some will. But most people won't because they want to be nice. They want to be kind. They don't know if they said something wrong. They'll start to like make it about them. Like, oh, maybe I said it wrong here. So I'm not going to say anything back to you. I'm just going to go along with it, but ultimately may not hire you because you didn't hit it. Like you didn't get it at the deep level that they needed you to in order for them to decide you're my person. You're the person I want to work with. You're the person I'm going to hire. So instead of saying to somebody, what I heard you say was, my suggestion and what I teach is you mentioned, and then you say whatever it was that they said, and then you say, is that right? Now, what you do with your voice is really important here. You can't go, is that right? Because that's too harsh, right? And instead, if you go, now, is that right? Like, it's a real question I'm asking, like, did I get it right? And the person can then say yes, or actually what I meant was, or actually what I said was. And it's a kinder way for this conversation to like smooth out any rough edges. versus saying to somebody, what I heard you say was, or paraphrasing, which can often go very, very wrong. All right. So this idea of being right, does it really serve you, or does it start to cost you clients? And maybe you don't care. Maybe you don't care. Being right is more important to you, and you're happy to lose the clients. And well, hopefully you've probably turned off the podcast by this point because you're like, I don't agree with Nikki and I don't need to hear this episode. Great. Congratulations. Stand in your place of authority and, stand on your, put your flag wherever you need to put it and stick with it. But for the rest of you that are really taking this in, start to notice where those places that you feel compelled to point out where you're right and somebody's wrong, and catch yourself and decide, how does this serve the relationship? Could I say this in a way that's more kind, or can I leave it unsaid and just move on in the conversation? And then decide what you're going to do next. All right. So as we wrap up this episode today, you may be listening to these episodes and know that I am sharing a question at the end of every episode, because 2021 for me is the year of the question. I know that relationships happen through question and conversation, and I hope that these questions have been helpful. Today's question is something that when things go wrong and somebody brings it to your attention, you can use this question, which is, how would you prefer to have this resolved? How would you prefer to have this resolved? Now, you need to say it soft and kind, and you need to ask it like it's a real question. If you are harsh or too forward and direct, too much eye contact, too much body language leaning in, how would you prefer to have this resolved? That can feel confrontational. But if you tilt your head to the side a little bit, if you curl your voice up at the end of your sentence and you say, how would you prefer to have this resolved? And you wait and you let the person answer, they may actually give you what you need to do to make things right, to make things better, to earn their business over and over again, to sometimes create a customer for life. Don't be afraid to ask this question. Now, I am going to do a training on this inside the Sales Maven Society. So if you want a little bit more about how to use this question, what to say next, if they were to give you an answer of something that you absolutely could not do, come join the Sales Maven Society, because I am doing trainings on all of these questions, little short snippet trainings, deeper dives into these questions and how to use them in your sales conversations. And frankly, if you're not a member of the Sales Maven Society yet, what are you waiting for? Come join us. This is the best place for you to really ignite your sales. This is the place where you bring your questions, you bring your concerns, you bring your sales situations, and I'm going to provide the answers and the guidance to boost your confidence and really hone your selling skills. So join the Sales Maven Society now by going to salesmavensociety.com. And when you sign up, if you enter the coupon code 47trial, the number 4, the number 7, TRIAL, it'll take $100 off your first month of membership. You can join for $47. Come hang out with us. Come hang out with me. Get the training. And this will be an opportunity for you to continue to hone your selling skills. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for sharing the podcast. It has been so fun to find and hear from new listeners who found out about the podcast because somebody who listened, shared, or talked about it in a group, forwarded a message or an episode for somebody to listen to, or shared about it on social media. And if we haven't connected on social media, let's do that. You can find me on LinkedIn, Nikki Roush. You can follow the Sales Maven business page on LinkedIn. You can find me on Instagram under Sales Maven. I would love to hear from you. Let's connect. Have a great rest of your day. Thank you so much for listening.
Thanks for listening to Sales Maven. Visit us online at yoursalesmaven.com/maven for more resources to boost your confidence and skills.